Yep.
Yeah, so I've been looking so forward to talking to you, man. I tell you what, though, before we get into this, I'd like to hear a little bit about your background before you got into the legal field and everything. Kind of tell me what your life was like growing up.
So I grew up in a large Catholic family, 7 siblings. I was born in the Midwest. My family moved to Huntington Beach, California when I was 7 years old. My dad got a job at McDonnell Douglas. Very, 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 very blue collar, meaning struggled to make ends meet. My dad worked 3 jobs oftentimes to take care of all the kids. Candidly, stood in line at food banks for handouts oftentimes. So just big family, just I think everyday kind of struggling family. I think a lot of people look at me like, oh, well, you're a fancy lawyer, and that's just not at all. In fact, I was the first person to go to college in my family, first
Wow.
person to have an advanced degree in my family. So yeah, my very blue collar. But anyway, so Huntington Beach, with growing up with my siblings, I've been in Huntington Beach my whole life. Growing up here, let's see what else. Played sports, played football, I wrestled. And I think actually sports was kind of a turning point for me in my, I guess, attitude towards life. I had always played soccer and I was always competitive, but there was something about high school sports, with especially contact sports, full contact sports, that I was like, you know what, I'm going to put it all out on the line. I'm going to be much more aggressive. I'm going to fight no matter how big the other guy is, whatever. So, and in high school too, I decided, I wasn't going to let life happen to me. Like I kind of saw my parents. I felt like my parents was kind of like letting life happen to them, and it caused them a lot of struggle. That I was going to go out and I resolved then in high school that I was going to go out in my life and make life happen. So I wasn't just going to sit there and let things happen to me. I was going to be proactive and fight and make things happen for me and for my future family.
Like that.
So I did, and this is a curveball, but I was actually a professional artist for a number of years right out of high school. I worked in an office doing 3-dimensional graphics for video games and TV commercials for about 13 years. 3 to 4 years of that time, I had my own company. Towards the tail end of it, I didn't work internationally. I had domestic clients who needed artwork done or content done for their games and TV commercials, and I would actually outsource it to other countries. So I was kind of the middleman, but I was also quality control and art director in that capacity. And it was when I had that company that I was, I was going to law school. Like it was during that period of my life where I'm like, I'm gonna get out of this on the other side, with a different career. So I went to law school, local law school here. I had a wife and 2 kids at the time. Number 3 was on the way in law school, like during law school. I remember studying for my first year final exams while I was in the hospital after my wife had given birth. So final exams are right before Thanksgiving, and my 3rd son was born November 8th. So it was right there. So anyway, and then out of law school, I got a job at a medical malpractice firm defending doctors and hospitals. I did that for a couple of years, then I went into general practice, became a trial attorney, got a lot of experience doing trials, became a partner at that firm, and then I ran for city attorney. And then you probably know the rest.
That's crazy. Started off in video games, though.
Yeah. Video games
in particular we might know?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, so I did a lot of work originally for the Genesis and the Super Nintendo system. So I did like ESPN Sunday Night Football and Super Nintendo. I did a couple obscure Genesis games that you probably wouldn't know, but like it progressed to higher, more sophisticated platforms like Xbox and PlayStation. So I did the original Indiana Jones game on Xbox. I did a lot of art for that, a lot of the animations. There was a game called Metal Fatigue, I think, that came out on the PC. I did Mr. Bones, was kind of a weird, eccentric game for at the time it was the Saturn platform. It was the Genesis's. So Sega had I forget what was the original platform.
They had Sega. Well,
Sega had, what was Sonic the Hedgehog on?
Sonic the Hedgehog. You had the Genesis, the CD, then the Saturn. I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. The
One,
Genesis.
it was
So it
like
was
their
the
family.
Saturn. Yeah, the Saturn was Mr. Bones. So that was a big project, but it was kind of on the margins. It didn't have a huge audience. So yeah, so a lot of those games I did. Silent Hill, which was a movie, but you turned it into a video game for Xbox and PlayStation. So I did about, in that 10-year span, I mean, I must have done about 25 different games. But you know, a lot of these games, they're low budget. They try to market them well, but they don't do very well. So
Right.
yeah. So anyway,
No, that's cool. I mean, I'm curious. Like, I've heard so many people speak so well of California, and then you hear what it is now. What was
yeah.
California like for you growing up?
It was amazing. It was. I so I don't know if I politically I don't. I know I grew up in a Ronald Reagan household. My folks were conservative and loved Reagan, but I don't know what the sentiment was out there because I was just too young to pick up on what the politics was. But it must have been like relatively conservative, or at least purple, right, in the 80s and 90s. And then when this one party rule happened, everything just went downhill, and it's really gone downhill very fast in the last 5 years because we don't have real leaders. We haven't had real leaders in office. Newsom and Attorney General Bonta, they're not real leaders at all. They're political hacks advancing a political agenda. Jerry Brown before Newsom was political too, but I really do think, even though he was a liberal and we didn't agree on hardly anything, I think he was an executive, and I think he was actually trying to manage the state. Newsom is not. It's just all just throwing out ideas and taking stabs at things, and it's all just agenda, ideology. So it's our form of governance in California has just fallen off a cliff, and it fell off a cliff dramatically after Jerry Brown. So yeah.
I mean, obviously, you may be not able to tell me all the way, but do you know what do you think his goal is here? It just seems like he is destroying the state.
I think there is an ideology that's gone so extreme that they truly are just pushing an ideological agenda. It's just pushing certain buttons and pulling certain levers to make California more woke, more far left, frankly, more elitist, at least from Sacramento's point of view. Like, they are elitists. I mean, they want to leave us everyday Californians with no safety and security in our neighborhoods, yet they hire private security, right? And they have private security year round, 24/7, right? So it's a very, very elitist attitude, that they have a certain way of life for themselves and a completely different way of life for others. I'll give you two quick examples. So Governor Newsom, for instance, during the COVID lockdown, he was mandating that everybody wore masks and social distanced and didn't go to church and got poked with the vax, and he was doing all this stuff, right? But then he goes to French Laundry, that restaurant in San Francisco, and he's sitting there in a private gathering, not social distancing, not wearing a mask, enjoying wine and the company of very affluent individuals. So a complete double standard. Another quick example is, he's really pushing this proliferating housing, developing housing throughout the state of California, which that's just gloss. That's a politically convenient narrative. That's gloss for what he's really trying to do is destroy cities like Huntington Beach that have single family homes. There's a lot of private property ownership. He wants to destroy that because what he wants to do ultimately is take our society here in California, our property owners here, our residents here, he wants to take California away from them and give it to transient living, frankly, illegal immigrants. And I'm naming different. So transients on the one hand, transient living on the one hand, on the other hand, illegal immigrants. He literally wants to rip the greatness and the goodness of California out of the hands of everyday, well-meaning Californians who pay taxes, who are law-abiding, and he wants to give it to, just look, let's be honest, criminals, transient living types, illegal aliens, those who don't pay taxes. And I think that's pretty obvious. It sounds sort of cynical, but I think it's true. And I think the other thing is, look no further than, now Steve Hilton's team is estimating through some additional research and investigation, $450 billion of taxpayer money that has now been lost by Sacramento through waste, fraud, and abuse. $450 billion is nearly $500 billion.
Yeah.
And that's over $10,000 per person in California. So there's 40 million people. That's not over $10,000 of lost tax money through waste, fraud, and abuse. That's not over $10,000 per taxpayer. That's over $10,000 per person standing in California. That's an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah.
And so frankly, what we saw happen in Detroit, right, and in Chicago, where they were thriving cities. I mean, they were sort of the apple of America's eye for decades. In the whatever, pick a decade, in the 30s, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. But then suddenly the elitists took over there, and the elitists wanted to remake their cities and rip it away from hardworking, tax-paying citizens, and they wanted to hand it over to effectively, criminals or transient living types or illegal immigrants, those who were not patriots and didn't want the best for America or best for Detroit. Well, now what we see here in California is that Newsom is doing it on a macro scale. He's doing what happened in Detroit effectively. He's doing it on a macro level here. And if we don't change California here soon, in this cycle, particularly in this election cycle, if we don't change California soon, the entire state of California will be like Detroit. So we are standing in the breach here, me and some other very willing and capable candidates running for statewide office. We're standing in the breach, and we're attempting to effectively rescue California, put it back on the track of low crime, prosperity. I am an everyday Californian. I talked about how I'm, grew up in a blue collar household. I saw my parents grind it out. My mom worked very, very hard to provide for us and get us educated well. My dad worked very hard, working oftentimes 3 jobs just to make ends meet, which is very hard for somebody without a college degree in this, modern society. I am an everyday Californian, and for me to see now everyday Californians up and down the state of California, like literally struggling. Honestly, I'm going to go further than that. What I see is them suffering. They're suffering at the hands of our leaders in Sacramento, and their suffering is on a scale that we have never seen before in California. And what I mean by that is, we have everyday Californians, hardworking Californians, the working class, and particularly, certain segments of our population, like the Latino community, which is very large in California. They're working so hard just to make ends meet. They too are working oftentimes 3 jobs or more to make ends meet, just like I did when I was a kid, or my father did when I was a kid, working 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And in addition to that hard way of life, they're also now suffering from the highest gas prices in the nation. They're suffering from the highest taxes in the nation, the highest rates of homelessness, which really hurts their communities and increases crime. And they're suffering from the highest crime rates in the state of California. So we have a crime-ridden society here. If you go up and down the streets of Los Angeles right now, in broad daylight, you will see young girls being prostituted in open daylight. Why? Because California policy now says that they are victims of human trafficking, that they have people controlling them, and that those people controlling them are the real criminals. And so you can't penalize or punish those individuals who are being trafficked. So now they effectively have free license to walk up and down the streets of our city, in our state, but particularly in LA, it's happening, and prostitute themselves, and really local law enforcement are not touching them. So that's another crime against society, right? Like that's another affront to the well-being of our society. And yet we have people in Los Angeles who are seeing this every day, who are victims to this every single day. But they're also dealing with high gas prices. And now they're hearing that the state wants to tax them tax them per mile that they drive. So there's just so much suffering, frankly, in California among everyday Californians, and not the wealthy necessarily, and not the elitists in Sacramento or the political elite in Sacramento, but Democrats, independents, and Republicans alike, all of them. Democrats, independents, and Republicans alike, all of them are fed up with our leadership in Sacramento. And that's why polling is showing two things. One, that California is headed in the wrong direction. Polling is showing now, the numbers are higher than ever, that California is in the wrong direction, that people love California, but people right now do not like living in California. So that's what the polling is showing. People are fed up. But the other thing too is that, people want change in California. And we have a governor's race, for instance, that has two Republicans leading the pack. And yes, the Democrats are splitting the vote on the Democrat side. That's not the point. The point is in a deep blue state like California, if we were thriving and the polling supported what the Democrats are doing right now, there would be another Gavin Newsom 2.0. There would be the next heir apparent to the governor's, office by his successor, who has been dominating in the media for the past year and a half and sucking all the oxygen out of the room. But we don't have a leading candidate like that. It's a mess on the Democrat side. Why? Because public opinion is against Democrat leadership right now. So you don't have a strong Democrat running. So I think there's an atmosphere in California right now. There's a sentiment among the voting population that they are fed up with leadership in Sacramento, which is why frankly, I'm in this race. I don't run fool's errands. If you look at my career, I've very well credentialed and experienced attorney, trial attorney, who has accomplished a tremendous amount in my career. And as a trial attorney, I have better than 90% win record in court. I could happily work in the private sector in a very lucrative job. I could happily retire early. I certainly don't need this job, but I want this job because I think the public is crying out right now for real change. And when I'm out there in the community and I am at these town halls and I have 300 or 400 people in front of me, all of their questions have to do with their struggles in everyday life. And that whether it's the crime rates or the prostitution that they're seeing or the attack on little girls by forcing boys to be in girls' sports, whatever the issue is, Californians feel attacked, they feel oppressed, they feel the suffering, and it's all at the hands of Sacramento. And they feel ripped off. Like I said, the $450 billion of their hard-earned taxpayer money, that's hard-earned taxpayer money. That's not monopoly money or pretend money or theoretical money. Those are actual dollars that hardworking taxpayers paid to Sacramento that filled the Sacramento coffers, that was then supposed to be committed to ending homelessness or hospice care or in-home health care or the SNAP program, food. All of this money was supposed to go to those in California who are suffering. So in addition to all the suffering I mentioned before, now add to it that those in need in California are not getting the services and the support that they need from the government programs that promised them the support and the services they need. So California is it's offensive right now. The leadership in California is offensive. It's overbearing. Frankly, I know it's criminal because the waste, fraud, and abuse, it's criminal. So our leaders need to go. And I know everyday Californians know that, and they're ready for a change. And that's why I'm in this race. Like I said, I certainly don't need this job. I want this job, but I certainly will need everyday Californians and anybody across the nation who wants to help support me so I can pull this off. And if anybody wants to know more about my campaign and who I am, they can go to my website at gates4ag.com. That's Gates, the number 4ag.com to learn more. And I have a real plan for how on day one, I can fix California. I know the governor candidates have their plans too, but another thing people should know is the Attorney General in California is incredibly powerful in a way. The Californians have given the Attorney General a lot of independent authority. So my authority is derived from the California Constitution. So there's a lot of things on day one that I'm going to be able to accomplish without the coordination or permission from any other executive in the government. I certainly don't need the legislature's approval to do what I want to do, or what I can do, or what I will do. So we're going to be really strong on day one and get to work for everyday Californians, and make sure that we restore a lot of things in our society, like Title IX compliance, like Second Amendment compliance, like reducing crime on day one. We have crime rates in California not because the laws are difficult or the criminals are bad, particularly bad. No, it's because we have prosecutors and law enforcement officials who are not enforcing the law as aggressively as they should. I know this because in Huntington Beach, we were very aggressive in reducing crime. And because we applied the laws aggressively and we were diligent, both from my office as a criminal prosecutor and then also our police on the street, we reduced crime by double digits in Huntington Beach. And Huntington Beach is considered one of the top 10 safest cities in the state of California out of 482 cities. So imagine that, out of 482 cities, almost 500 cities in the state of California, Huntington Beach is considered one of the top 10 safest. And it's not because there's any magic about Huntington Beach. We're actually a large city. We should have more crime. Huntington Beach by population is the 23rd largest city in the state of California of almost 500 cities. We're in the top 4% by size, and yet we're one of the safest in the entire state of California. Why? Because we're tough on crime. So I've done it, I know how to do it, and I want to go to Sacramento and do it. And when I do that for the entire state of California, our communities are going to be safe, our families are going to be safe, and our businesses will thrive. We're going to get back to promoting everyday Californians and creating a life where everyday Californians thrive, and the working class, the hardworking class, particularly the Latino community, they are going to, they're going to prosper. They're actually going to prosper. We're going to turn this, we're going to flip this from suffering in California to prosperity.
Awesome. I know as a lifelong Californian yourself, I wanted to see if Escobel wanted to throw something in there, because he was talking about all sorts of things you've been telling me about. It blows my mind that the Californians have allowed this to go on for so long. I definitely feel like everybody's ready for change, and I hope it comes to it.
Yeah, it's a lot of one-party rule. We've had one-party rule. We've had a supermajority of Democrats in our legislature for far too long now, for many years. We've had one-party rule, or the Democrats ruling in all offices in every aspect of state government for almost 20 years. And when you have one-party rule, you basically have a monopoly by one party on the state who controls everything, which means they all cover for each other. There's no checks and balances. So the Attorney General right now, Rob Bonta, has been covering for Newsom and the Attorney General before covered for the governor before. And so this goes back for almost 2 decades. When they cover for each other, that's when corruption occurs. Just to give you an idea, the nearly $500 billion of lost taxpayer money through waste, fraud, and abuse, that has ballooned over the past 5 years, as long as Attorney General Rob Bonta has been in office. So, and he has never announced an investigation. He's never asked a question about where the money went. So 5 years of Attorney General Rob Bonta covering for Governor Newsom and this cabal, this corruption, almost $500 billion lost through waste, fraud, and abuse. And our Attorney General has never announced an investigation, never asked a question. Why? Because he knows who took the money. He knows who took the money. And that's what happens from one-party rule.
That's right. Escobel, I knew you had some questions. I was going to let you get them.
Yeah, there's so many, from Title IX to Riley Gaines to Chloe Cole to Jeff Younger to Adam Vina. But yeah, the fraud, waste, and abuse is huge. And not only the fraud, waste, and abuse, but Prop 36. Every subject in California right now is either an 80-20 or 70-30.
Yeah.
With Title IX, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. No one wants men and girls sports, period. We brought bills through the legislature. Kate Sanchez brought AB 89. They shot it down right in committee. So if you can't get out of committee, the only backstop you have is having an attorney general that can then back it up, like Ken Paxton did in Texas. And he's just like, no more trans surgeries. You're going to enforce Title IX and get men out of girls sports.
Yeah.
So when you have a Rob Bonta instead of a Michael Gates, who will become our next attorney general, he's busy suing hospitals right now to force surgery on kids. And it's like, these are all 80-20 subjects that when you have a bad AG, you have a bad governor, there's no backstop. You have a legislation that you can't even get bills. I mean, we had Bill Saley, Matt Walsh, Kate Sanchez, AB 89. We had 500 people testifying. And the people testifying for just getting men out of girls' sports, they were all called Nazis. And it just seems like the ideology goes straight to, you're a Nazi if you don't believe in our elitist ideology or
well, let me I think there is a spiritual battle here. There's definitely some dark forces. I think for a lot of members of the public who may not see it that way, I think they should start to look at what's going on in California that way. And you know, if you don't look at it that way, you might sort of explain this away, like, well, you know, the boys allowing men to go into women's restrooms, or allowing you know, children to be mutilated, or allowing young girls to be prostituted without enforcement on our streets. Well, you know, that might be like an interesting policy approach. It'll probably fail, but at least our government's doing something to try to accomplish something. Like I think people who, you know, they hear about this, I think they try to rationalize it. They don't get it, but you know, I think there's many of them are just kind of dismissive of it. Like, well, I don't like it, but you know, it's, you know, the government's just, you know, being stupid or whatever. I don't think that's the case. I think if you add it all up, you see a real, we live in a culture right now of child sacrifice. Like we are really sacrificing our children, and it can span the spectrum, whether it's, you know, subjecting our children to the LGBTQ lecture culture in our classrooms, all the way to the mutilations like we talked about, all the way to, you know, young girls, 12, 13, 14 years old, prostituting themselves in broad daylight in Los Angeles. There really is effectively this culture of death, like attack, particularly on our young girls. And so we need to stop sacrificing our children. And we as adults, we have to be the adults in the room, and we have got to start defending our children. We have got to start protecting our children. We have got to start guarding our children. And when you know, people are forced to, when they realize that, hey, I need to actually protect my children from some of the teachers in the classroom who are not only forcing LGBTQ or trans information on them, and they're captive audiences, right? Like they're stuck in the classroom and they're forced to listen to this stuff. They're exposed to this culture of destruction and ultimately death, you know, because a lot of these trans individuals, I mean, you can talk to Chloe and any of the other names that you mentioned, a lot of them, you know, when they go through these trans surgeries, they're not happy on the other side. And the suicide rate among trans who have actually gone through the procedures and are trying to live that lifestyle, the rate of suicide is too high. So this is also a culture of death, because ultimately it doesn't end up in a good place. These people don't survive and they don't thrive. So, but our culture and our laws and our leaders are not only allowing this, but they're promoting it. I mean, if you listen to Governor Newsom, he attacks Trump for the most part, but then every once in a while when he talks about policy, he's really pushing this trans culture and trans policy. He's pushing it, like affirmatively, like proactively pushing it. He wants more of it, not less of it. And so we have got to, again, stand in the breach. We've got to stop this culture of death, this culture of child sacrifice, where we are allowing our children to be sacrificed. We've got to get back into a position of being the adults in the room, that we're going to protect our children, that we're going to stand in the way of teachers and schools that force, that impose this trans culture on our kids, really in secret. You know, they're doing it away from view of the parents. And we have got to stand in the breach and protect our children from prostitution on the street. We've got to stand in the way of our children being mutilated in hospitals and by doctors. And let me tell you, when I'm Attorney General, not only are we going to be compliant with Title IX on day one, and we're going to make sure that all of our sports and education systems throughout the state of California are compliant with Title IX, and we protect our young girls and our young women. But I'm going to dismiss those cases that Rob Bonta filed against hospitals, including a children's hospital, to force them to mutilate children. Those are going to be dismissed, and I will be prosecuting doctors and hospitals that perform trans surgeries on children, because we are going to protect our children. And look, even if people say, well, you know, isn't that a little bit too extreme the other way? Because there are people who want to elect for this type of procedure or surgery. My response is, then wait till they're adults. Then wait till they're
Absolutely.
18 and they can make an informed decision. You know, I'm actually pretty libertarian. You know, if you want to mutilate yourself or torture yourself when you're 18 years old or older, that's one thing. I'm not saying it's always legal. You know, I'm certainly not giving permission or license, but what you know, depending on the circumstances. But at least you're an adult and making an informed decision. But when you're a child, no parent should be able to consent to a surgery or a procedure like that, and no doctor should even be willing to pick up a scalpel. I was just talking to somebody this weekend. I was at an event. I was talking to somebody this weekend, and she came up to me. She's like, I want you to know, Michael, I have been a nurse in a children's hospital for 25 years. And what you're saying about what's going on in the hospitals is absolutely happening. And I asked her, I said, what is the youngest individual you know of? Because she said, I've seen these mutilation surgeries for years. I see it all the time. I said, what's the youngest individual? She said, I believe the youngest I saw was a double mastectomy at 10 years old. And why the medical profession and or the parents can't wait till that child, just wait 8 more years or 6 more years, or, you know, depending on the circumstances, 2 more years until that individual's 18 years old. Why can't they wait until that person's 18 years old to make their own informed decision as a consenting adult themselves? I don't get it. I do get it. It's actually, it's a spiritual, well, there's that, but this is a battle for, we live in a child sacrifice culture. And so you know, there are forces going after our children.
Absolutely.
And so we have got to stop this. And I will stop this when I'm Attorney General. And I can't wait to stop it. I'm going to take so much satisfaction in protecting our children and going to bat for the most vulnerable in our society, up and down the state of California. I can't wait.
Michael, I got a buddy. He said he met you this past weekend, Adam Vina.
Yes.
They've been trying to do this to his son Aiden since he was 2 years old.
Yes.
2 years old. Who in their right mind wants to see a gender transition surgery done to a 2-year-old child? It does not make sense. And what I don't understand is why people would promote this. I don't even know how it's became a conversation in the first place. And, you know, when these dads first started coming to me, there was that thought in the back of my head, like, is this real? There's still a lot of people that think, I get it all the time. They're like, this is not really happening, but you've seen it. And you're talking to the people. This is really happening. They are doing these experiments on kids.
It's really happening. And I, you know, Newsom has deemed California a sanctuary for people who want trans surgeries performed. He's deemed California a sanctuary for people who want abortions. He's deemed California a sanctuary, really, frankly, for anybody who wants to, you know, mutilate themselves or you know, have an abortion, or, I mean, it's shocking to me what he's gone out on a limb and affirmatively done to satisfy and speak to a culture of death and mutilation and destruction of humans, of bodies here in California. It's shocking to me. We should, in California, be a culture of promoting life and promoting everybody's well-being, promoting the human race. And what we're seeing is the opposite. I talked about the high taxes and the micromanaging, even the high density housing, trying to destroy the cities we live in. And there's such a culture of death and destruction here. I mean, you just look at any policy and it's bent towards death and destruction. I mean, just the fact that even look at law enforcement. You know, if you're a law enforcement officer out there, or you have somebody who works in law enforcement, the state has done everything it can to work with local city officials and county officials to undermine our law enforcement and make them irrelevant. They talk about defunding them and reimagining law enforcement rather than supporting them and backfilling them and defending them and promoting them. And I just come from a completely different vantage point. As you know, not only did I start a criminal prosecutor program in Huntington Beach to support our cops in the work they were doing, so we were adding a layer of city level prosecution to back our blue, to back our cops, to support the work they were doing so that there was follow through on their arrests. But I also made a career of defending our law enforcement in court. I literally took their cases to trial when our police were sued for doing their job. I prevailed, for instance, in a $20 million lawsuit against 2 of our police officers for an officer-involved shooting, and that case went to trial in 2022. That's one of the more recent big wins I had. $20 million case, I got a complete defense verdict after a 5-week jury trial. A complete defense verdict. So I completely exonerated our police officers. And that's a lawsuit that most other cities would settle. If that case was an LA case, Mayor Bass would have settled that for $10 or $15 million, which undermines the work our police are doing. If you don't defend our police in court, and then in addition to that, you try to defund them, you leave our state unsafe. You know, the police are the front lines, not only at keeping our community safe, preventing crime, but they're also the front lines of our freedom. They are on the front lines to defend our freedom. And how do I make that connection? Because if you're in LA, for instance, or you're in some of these cities, especially inner cities or underserved communities, where you're afraid to even leave your own home. You're literally afraid to leave your own home. You can't walk down the street to the store to get a gallon of milk, or you can't walk your kids to school, or you can't walk your grandmother to church at the local church. You can't walk down the street because you're afraid. Then you're not experiencing the freedom that America should be offering. That's not living in freedom. That's living in fear. And so we need to get our cops back. We need to support them and make sure they're well-resourced. We need to back them. We need to defend them in court when they're sued for doing their jobs. We need to make sure they're well-resourced. And we need to have prosecutors up and down the state backing our police officers so that when our police officers make arrests and they put their life on the line and keep our community safe, they know that the prosecutors are going to follow through with actual prosecutions and make sure that people go to jail and not be hands-off like George Gascon, the DA in LA, was before he got unelected or got replaced by Hochman. That we need to back the blue and support law enforcement. We need to get back to the rule of law so that people can enjoy the freedom that America has to offer, the promise of freedom in America. Right now, we have so many Californians that don't experience that freedom. They live in fear inside their home. So there's so much about California that's completely upside down. It's backwards. And when I'm Attorney General, I'm going to work, beginning on day one, I'm going to work to restore California to one of the greatest states in America where we all enjoy freedom and we all enjoy prosperity.
You know, it's just one of those jobs that, I thank our blue so much. They go out there and put their lives on the line every day, and they need to be defended. They're the ones out there defending us. And I think it's just a shame how they've been treated in this country. Right. But Mike, I want to go back to that about the transing issue with these children. This is something I've been so passionate about for so many years. And I wanted to, just kind of pick your brain a little bit more on that. Yeah. What does that look like when you become Attorney General? What's some of the ways that you can make sure that these surgeries will not be allowed there? I got my buddy, Jeff Younger. That's exactly what it's became as a sanctuary state. He was probably the first case that had really hit it on the mainstream about them trying to transition his son because his ex-wife was a pediatrician, went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And no matter how hard he fought it, they just kept siding with her. And we got it banned in the state of Texas. Well, she just moved to California where they stripped him of all parental rights to his son just because he does not want his son to be turned into a girl. What is it that you could do as Attorney General to make sure this type of stuff isn't happening there? And I got a follow-up question after that.
Well, there's a few things, and there's some things that we can do to work with a new governor, new leadership in the governor's office, and hopefully an updated legislature where we can all come together and update our laws, work with the governor to get some executive orders. So there's actually a lot of different moving parts to this. But from my vantage point, we have got to put apply some pressure to the family courts
Yes.
to make sure that we don't have judges and we don't have attorneys working in there preying on victim families to have a bias towards transgender and basically putting children in harm's way. We have got to make sure that our family courts have the required integrity, that we have good jurists on the bench who understand the Constitution, that in California that we need to apply and deploy the 14th Amendment, that parents have constitutional rights over their children. And that means that children shouldn't be capriciously ripped away from one parent and given to another, that if there is a separation that's required, a judicial separation that's required to have separation from a particular parent, that there's actually a real harm that's presented by that parent. And we're not seeing that. We're seeing children ripped away from parents right now in favor of a parent that wants to subject that child to trans surgeries or whatever, right? And then we're seeing a pattern of children ripped away from parents who really are innocent and have done nothing. They have done nothing. And so we have got to put pressure on that system to make sure that the 14th Amendment, the constitutional rights of both parents are honored and respected, which means that the default position should be that if there's an issue in a divorce or within two adults with a separation, that there should be a default position where that child is still co-parented. The default position, I know every case is different, but the default position is that every parent still at least has 50% custody and access to that child without penalty, and that no decisions of that child or by that child or for that child that are lifelong decisions like trans procedures and surgeries like that are not made in those types of situations, that those decisions are reserved for when that child is 18 years or older, is at least an adult. So that's one issue. The other issue is I'm going to dismiss all of these cases against hospitals and medical facilities, including the most recent one against a children's hospital. I'm going to dismiss all of those lawsuits that the current Attorney General Bonta has filed against them to force them to perform surgeries. There are actually good hospitals and doctors out there in our communities that refuse to perform these trans surgeries. We have got to dismiss those lawsuits. Rob Bonta has weaponized the California Attorney General's office, the California Department of Justice, against the medical community to force these procedures. That's going to end on day one. And, I know people will have a debate about, well, these services should be made available. They can debate all they want. And if people, once they're 18, want these procedures, that's a different question and a different issue that can be addressed differently. But for minors, we are going to dismiss those lawsuits. We're not going to force doctors and hospitals to perform those surgeries on minors. And I will go further than that and say that wherever possible, we are going to prosecute doctors and hospitals that perform mutilation surgeries on children. We absolutely have to protect our children, and we are going to do that and make sure that if any such procedure like this is ever performed, it's done on somebody who's their own consenting adult, that they're 18 years or older. It's not going to happen among our minors. Parents shouldn't be able to consent to that type of mutilation. I mean, look, we're talking about procedures that involve cutting healthy body parts off of healthy bodies. And there may be mental issues, there may be hormonal issues, but these are healthy bodies and these are healthy body parts. And so the medical community should not be engaged in that type of elective surgery. These are not necessary surgeries. They are elective surgeries by parents who have mental disorders or children who have issues, and then willing doctors, where there's this industry to make money on this. And all of this has to come to an end. So there's a few different things that I'm going to be able to do on day one. But as I said, there's a lot of moving parts to this issue. And hopefully, if everyday Californians can pay attention to this election and wake up to who's running and what the issues are, and can vote for the right people and put them in office, we can make these real changes.
you hit the nail on the head and kind of hit on this a little bit already, but I feel like so many of these issues that we're talking about come from the lack of fathers in the home.
Yeah.
We have a fatherless crisis. And when, not trying to make this a gender issue, but from my observations with this transgender issue and parents trying to get that surgery on the kids, I have yet to see a father trying to do this to his child. It's usually the mom's doing this. Now, I heard there might be one case out there. I'm not aware of it. But in particular, the cases that I know of where the dads are trying to stop it from happening, they have no custody of their children. And then they go to the family courts and fight. And it feels like no matter what they do, they have no access to their children. Our family courts are a wreck. And I loved how you talked about, that that presumption and that 50-50. What are some other things, Michael, you think in the family courts? They're in the state of California. I'm not as aware. I know every state's different, but are there some things that we can do to really strengthen those rights to make sure that we've got fathers, strong fathers in the home, whether mom and dad have divorced, kids still need both parents, but it feels like our laws don't protect that relationship with the dad.
Well, and yes, and as the Attorney General, I'm the top law enforcement officer in the state of California, and I do have the ability to file interventions into cases. And so I also have the option, depending on the circumstances in the case, to file an intervention to basically become a party to a lawsuit, to be able to communicate to the court the position that the Attorney General believes is the law under the circumstances. And so one other thing that we can be doing is intervening into cases. So if a case warrants it, we will intervene in order to protect a party or an advance an interest, or make a case known to the court what the Attorney General believes the law is. So that's another opportunity. But you're absolutely right. And by the way, where there's corruption, meaning there are attorneys who represent parties in these courts who aren't actually acting in the best interest of the party they represent, but they're actually acting either in the best interest of what they think the court wants or what they think the other party wants. That type of failure of good representation on the attorney's part, that will be dealt with as well. So there's a few things that we can do. But you're absolutely right. Fathers are an essential part of the family. Obviously, they're indispensable. I'm going to go further than essential. They're indispensable parts of the family. And a well-ordered family has a father and a mother and children. And fathers are critical to certain types of leadership, certain types of influences among the family members, particularly the children. And this is all by God's design, right?
Yep.
God ordered the family to have a father, a mother, and children. That's his order. It's not only is there a spiritual dynamic to it, there's also obviously a purely natural law. That's nature. And for us to break that apart or to violate that creates disorder, and that disorder leads to dysfunction. And so whenever we see a father, leaving a family or a family broken up, there is a certain amount of dysfunction that occurs, and it's up to all of us and the family members and the family members of the family members to pull together and try to limit the dysfunction or reduce the harm. And many families, where a divorce or separation is justified among a mother and a father, they are able to pull together and keep it together. And they do share the children 50-50, and they do work it out. And so there are many families who are able to have a tremendous amount of success surviving a divorce or separation. But there are some instances like you're referring to where they're just not able to make it. The father leaving or abandoning the family or whatever the issue is, or there is a separation or divorce, there's such a breakdown that there's a real suffering occurs, real dysfunction occurs. So we should be, like I said, at a macro level in California, we should be promoting life. We should be promoting the life and success of the family unit, which is the most basic form of our society. The most fundamental building block of our society is our families. And when we have a breakdown of the family, we have a breakdown of society. So we all need to work against that and try to keep our families together, try to support our families that may have to separate or divorce. and just ensure the well-being of our children, which is really, it is the next generation. And so, so we all have to work much harder, and I think our family courts need to be better.
Yeah, he's like you said, he's hitting the nail on the head. So whether you're this is a good versus evil in California, and they're testing the limits of it.
Mm-hmm.
And Bonta just lost at the U.S. Supreme Court in Mirabelli versus Bonta, which basically enforced the 14th Amendment parental rights.
Right.
But also, even if you're not religious, let's just say you're an atheist. Let's just go with the science. Puberty was designed by they designed puberty for a reason, right? And so when you have people that are saying, oh, well, the science says, would you rather have, a live trans kid or a dead child? That's just a scare tactic. All we're saying is let puberty happen. And after 18, whatever you want to do is up to you.
Yeah.
And then the last thing back to the
well,
the
you know
family,
why they're afraid to let puberty happen?
yes,
Because it furthers the gender, right? So it's the fulfillment of the gender and the sex. So what they're basically trying to do is say, we're going to cut it off before it happens. And it's like, no, if you're a man, if you're a boy, you're going to be a man. If you're a girl, you're going to be a woman. And so they're trying to interfere with nature and make sure that that does not happen. So it's not about confusion. It's about trying to cut it off at the pass. So the fulfillment is not manifest in a mature woman or a mature man. So it's totally diabolical.
Exactly. Yeah. And with the bills like SB 107 and AB 1955, one of our own assembly women who's running right now, Carol Pelfley, they actually did transition her child behind her back through therapists, through the school. So she came out, she's a businesswoman. And like you, she's like, I just can't sit by and do nothing. So she's running for assembly so we can hopefully flip that. But even further past the just let puberty happen is back to the family court. And you're an attorney. So for an attorney to lose their license, it has to be clear and convincing evidence. But for a parent to lose their parental rights, it just has to be a preponderance. And right there, you're already violating the California Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and now backed by Mirabelli versus Bonta. If Bonta stayed in office, he's not going to comply with that Supreme Court case. He lost. So that's why it's even more important for California to put you into office, because you have parental rights, you have puberty. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. Title IX. It just strengthens the family and the middle class, but most importantly, it protects the kids. And the kids is not a left-right thing. You know,
this is
people don't care what side of the aisle you're on.
This is an 80-20 issue or even a 90-10 issue. So Bonta can stay on the 10% side of the 90-20 issue. I'm going to enjoy the 90% side or the 90 issue of the 90-10 issue. No, you're absolutely right. And it is very frustrating. I've been fighting even for parental rights as the city attorney of Huntington Beach. So, I worked in the Trump administration for the past year, but before that I was the city attorney for 10 years. And I took up a number of cases against Sacramento. I fought against Sacramento for 10 years. I fought for Huntington Beach against Sacramento for 10 years. One of the cases we filed was the parental rights case. So that Mirabelli case that you're mentioning, we actually had a sister case, Huntington Beach versus Newsom, and we prevailed. That case prevailed, and that AB 1955 was struck down in our case. And it was caught up in appeals, and then the Mirabelli case advanced to the Supreme Court. So what you're saying is absolutely true. And there's a real lawlessness in Sacramento. So like you said, so even with the U.S. Supreme Court coming down with its decision on Mirabelli, basically saying that California's got to stop advancing AB 1955, which for the viewers, as you may not know, but I'll remind you for the viewers, it is that state law that basically mandates that teachers keep secrets from parents with regard to their children's gender identity issues or gender transition issues. So it basically takes mandatory reporters of teachers and turns them into mandatory non-reporters by forcing them to keep secrets from parents about their very own children. And so there's a real lawlessness in California because our Attorney General Rob Bonta wants to ignore the U.S. Supreme Court ruling. as you well know. He's ignoring Prop 36. So he doesn't want there to be basically additional penalties for certain crimes, quality of life crimes here in California, which the voters voted for. So he's not going to enforce Prop 36 because he doesn't want to. He says there's lack of funding, but then they didn't build any new funding in for Prop 36 in the new budget. So it's a complete joke. They're completely lawless. And this is really an important point. This is sort of a macro point that I think, the audience, particularly of your audience who's in California, needs to take real notice of or take heed. Since there's such lawlessness in California that we've seen, whether it's Prop 36, without zero enforcement on Prop 36, even though we passed it, it is the law of the land. Or like you said, the Mirabelli case, which basically stops 1955, and now Attorney General Rob Bonta is going to say, I don't care what the U.S. Supreme Court says. We're going to try to figure out a way of how that decision doesn't apply to our advancing or implementing or enforcing AB 1955. Think about what's going to happen with voter ID in California when it passes. So it's on the ballot here in November. It's going to be on the ballot in November. We have enough signatures. It's going to be on the ballot. California is going to pass it by an overwhelming margin because there's 72% support in California for voter ID. There's 62% among Democrats. So it's well liked across all the political spectrum. So it will pass. When it passes, Rob Bonta is going to treat voter ID just like he treats the Mirabelli decision in 1955 and Prop 36. He's not going to enforce it. And he's probably going to actually invite challenges, court challenges to voter ID once it's passed. And you know what he's going to do when that occurs? He won't go to court to defend it. He's going to allow it to be attacked by extremist groups who don't want voter ID in California. It's going to be in court. There's going to be an attack on voter ID in court by extremist groups who don't want voter ID in front of a judge, and Rob Bonta is not going to show up to court to defend it. And so what do you think the court's going to do? The court is going to be left to do what it did with Prop 8. If you remember years and years ago, Prop 8 was the proposition that passed in California that marriage equaled a man plus a woman, basically saying that marriage is only going to be recognized by a union between a man and a woman in California. That passed overwhelmingly by over 70%. Well, that law, which was the law of the land, was challenged in court by extremist groups. And guess what? Then Attorney General Kamala Harris did not show up to court to defend it. So what happened? Prop 8 was struck down. So the only people that showed up to court that day were the extremists attacking Prop 8, which was a legitimate law that was passed by the people of California, and the judge had no choice but effectively let Prop 8 be struck down because Kamala Harris didn't show up to defend it. So time and time again, we've seen attorney generals play with democracy, undermine democracy, play with the law and the will of the people, and allow laws that were duly passed, rightfully passed, constitutionally passed, allow them to be struck down in courts. And so to your point, what you just said is absolutely true. We are lawless in California. Our leaders don't promote law and defend law. They don't uphold and defend the rule of law. Attorney General has a pattern and practice of not defending the rule of law, not respecting the U.S. Supreme Court. And so we have to do more in California by not looking to courts at this point or looking to the Attorney General. We need to look to candidates running for office so we can replace our leadership and get back to the rule of law in California. And when I'm Attorney General on day one, that's exactly what we're going to do. Prop 36 will be enforced on day one in California, for example, with or without funding. I am going to enforce Prop 36 on day one in California. I don't care what Bonta says or Newsom says. That's going to happen on day one. So that's just one more issue that I'll be addressing on day one in California. But we need new leadership really, really bad.
And what about on the back end? So I'm sure you're familiar with the David Funston case and the Cain Velasquez case. So David Funston was about to get paroled until society went, wait, hold on. This guy has 3 life sentences for sexually abusing children. And he's getting out early. And Cain Velasquez, whose son was abused, he served his full term.
Yeah.
How can the Attorney General affect the parole board and not letting the David Funstons and these criminals out, which Ashley Zavala of KCRA just had a whistleblower say the people in charge of the parole department, the supervisors, are telling the people in charge of the parolees, oh, you don't know where that guy is? Don't worry about it. Just monitor his ankle monitor. How can the Attorney General affect cases like the David Funston case and
So
the parolees?
the Attorney General is the top law enforcement officer in the state of California. I've got, not only do I have purview over all the district attorneys in the state of California, and all of the sheriffs in the state of California. So there's 58 counties, there's 58 sheriffs and 58 DAs. I have direct purview over all of them to ensure that they are enforcing the law the way I want them to, and to the degree that I want them to. In addition to that, I will have an office of over 1,000 attorneys in the Department of Justice, the California Department of Justice. And we too are also involved in advancing prosecution, but upholding and defending the rule of law. We're engaged in a whole host of civil cases. So there's a lot of responsibility on the Attorney General. Part of that is having a seat at the table when it comes to what the law is or what our law enforcement should be. And so I will have influence over that process as well by showing up to work, showing up, pulling up my seat at the table, and making sure that I weigh in with the state of the law and what I think should be the punishment and should be the penalty. But in addition to that, I will be working with the governor as well, because as you know from the recent stories, that a lot of this has fallen on Governor Newsom's desk. A lot of the criticism has come to Governor Newsom. So it's important too to elect the right leadership in the governor's office, because too, the governor has great authority over this process. And so it will be important for the voters to not only elect me as the Attorney General, but to elect a really good governor candidate. And as you probably know, I've been on the campaign trail with Steve Hilton. He's going to be a great governor if given the opportunity. And we are asking the population, the community, the voting community in California to please take a look at these candidates and make the right decisions for California, so that we can, like you said, deal with this parole situation. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. The double standard, the hypocrisy, whatever you want to call it, letting hardened criminals out while letting others who far less violations or far less wrongdoing, whatever you want to call it, crimes, whatever, sit in prison or jail for far too long. So, or frankly, are innocent, may be innocent. So, this absolutely has to end. We have to correct this. Like I said, this all goes back to, we are a state of lawlessness and we have got to fix this, but it's up to the California people. It's up to the voters. We've got to fix this now. So I would like anybody who's interested in taking a look at my campaign or getting to know me more to go to my website, www.gates4ag.com. That's Gates, the number 4ag.com. I'm on social media as well, both X and Instagram. You can search for me there. Please look me up. Please follow. Please donate if you can. Every dollar that you donate is going to go to advancing our campaign and getting the word out that I need to be the next Attorney General.
That's what I was going to ask you on the way out, man. I'll tell you, right before you came on, I did my research and I was surprised to see the amount of people on there saying I'm a liberal voting for Gates. And that's the way it should be. This should not be a partisan thing, guys. If you keep doing the same things you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. And you got a guy right here. I truly do believe in him. Michael, on the way out, do you mind telling everybody one more time why they should support you? And you just told them how they can support you guys. Get out there, visit the website, but I'll let you take us out.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So I've always been viewed in Huntington Beach and Orange County, California, frankly, as a fighter for the people. I have not been afraid to take the fight to Sacramento. I was the architect of Huntington Beach's voter ID law. I was the architect of Huntington Beach's declaration of non-sanctuary status. I advanced all of those things. I was the tip of the spear on all of those things. I sued California and won $38 million from my taxpayers in Huntington Beach because California wrongfully withheld millions of dollars of taxpayer money from Huntington Beach residents. I sued and got that $38 million back. I fought the COVID lockdowns. I opened up our beaches by suing Newsom during COVID. I fought in court to defend our police officers. I'm a fighter. My wife always jokes, she thinks it's because of my Irish stock that I'm a fighting Irish, but regardless, I have fight in me and I want to fight for everyday Californians. So if California will give me the chance, I absolutely will go to Sacramento, and I will continue to fight for everyday Californians. I can't be bought. I can't be influenced by big influences. I can only be, frankly, influenced by the people of California. I want to do their will, and I want to restore California to a state of rule of law and law and order, because by doing so, we are all free. Society is then fair, and we can all prosper. We can all thrive. So that's my goal for California, is that we can all enjoy being Californians again. I said it before, we all love California, but we don't like living here right now. I want a California that is safe, low crime, low homelessness, actually zero crime, zero homelessness. We can get there with tough enough enforcement. That's what I want for everyday Californians, so that we can like and love living here again.
That's it, brother. Michael, I appreciate it, and we're pulling for you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.